Yes, we're continuing in that stead, and Robert Obafo also joins us now. He's a legal practitioner. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Maureen, it's a pleasure.
Well, looking at all of this, I mean, yes, the electoral umpire did recently, in fact, yesterday, talk to politicians saying, slow down. I mean, you've been in a similar position as an electoral umpire. How much weight do you think that talk that they give to politicians will hold?
Well, it's best an advice. And I think it is better the politicians recognize and take to that advice in the interest of everybody, in the interest of the country, for development, for peace. I think it's necessary that they take to the advice of Professor Jega.
But do you think that the umpire, because there are accusations here and there about INEC, the latest of which happens to be Anambra, and then they complain about the activities of the commission. So in the light of those complaints, do you think then that they can still take them seriously?
Well, that is a different, I would say, a different ball game altogether, because if you're talking about a situation where INEC is being seen as to playing, some kind of a game, as you may want to call it, or not complying with what is supposed to be done. That is complaint from politicians. You will always have complaints from politicians anyway. So, but if you look at the advice holistically, I think it's irrespective of Anambra or whatever we're talking about in respect of 2015, holistically looking at the polity, the situation in the country, I think politicians should take that advice. And I urge them to so do.
Why do you think this usually happens with politicians? I mean, yes, it's 2 years to major elections, but the jostling has begun.
Chamberlain, that's interesting. You see, you had Parliament to go back. You had a professor last week here, and fortunately, I really took interest in what he was, his postulations. He did history. I think he's from University of Ife.
Yeah.
I can't readily remember his name now. And
Kemi Rotimi.
Yes, Kemi Rotimi or something. He tried to put historical perspective to what is happening in Nigeria. And I do agree with him totally that you have to know where you are coming from for you to know where you are now. Then where you are now is going to determine where you foresee to be. Historical perspective in the sense that Nigeria has been governed by military. We last had order, proper order in this country in 1966 or 65. By that, a lot has happened. Because if you don't have order, and the constitution as it is, even as a lawyer, is highly flawed. So, and if you have a document that is supposed to create order, remember, God, when he was creating the world, he first of all created order. So, if the constitution that is supposed to be the guiding principle of creation of order, which will bring progress and peace and all that, is flawed, then you should know that the country is in a problem. How did this constitution come about? You have to look at that. So to that extent, you have to put historical perspective to whatever we're doing in this country so that we can get it right.
Does it mean that if we implement the document as we have it, we cannot have order?
That is not exactly what I am saying. That the document itself, in implementing it, is flawed with a lot of inconsistency. And this brewed a lot of, permit me to say, anger among people. And that is what you see being dissipated. This is what you see. And in any case, instead of delving more on issues, and I must say the media has not really, helped matter by focusing more on issues of development rather than giving attention to this political statement, politicians' statements.
Maybe you can actually redirect it now. Developments like what?
Thank you. I had the issue of ASU has been on for some time. I even believe that it's not been given enough publicity in terms of national discourse. And we can go into that. That can take us a lot of the whole of today in looking at what is happening in ASU. That is very important. The last speaker that just left was talking about, mentioned roads. And he did mention that some roads could take 6 years. Yes, depending on who and what is the commitment of government in that respect. I'll give you an example. The Ofosu or a road has been on, and everybody is applauding that road, and almost completed because the last time I passed through, in the less than a year. In less than a year. Because that government showed commitment to it. So I will not agree with that kind of speaker that said, or with the last speaker that just said.
But you know, it took several years before that road got to that stage.
Yes, you observe acceleration. I'm talking about commitment. So also, when you look at, for instance, the Lagos-Badagry Express, what do they call it, this border up to Badagry, Lazo, you see, it's so deplorable. And I heard that they've been on it for several years now. I think when we focus more on things that are development based or issues that we cannot talk enough about them. That's just the point I'm making about it.
Again,
rather than giving attention to political statements that tend to heat up our political space.
But doesn't that also affect development?
What do you mean now?
Such statements, such political statements.
That is why we should not even give it so much attention, because it's not doing us any good. That we should focus on things that when we discuss them, that will lead us to getting results. That's the point I'm making. That's the point I'm making.
Because the point I get from all of this is, sorry to cut you there, if I'm a politician, I'm in charge of a particular ministry, and I decided to enmesh myself into my party politics, and every now and then I leave my ministry, agency, parastatal, or even state, and I'm in Abuja or at a party headquarters trying to play politics, doesn't that affect the development you're talking about?
Yes, it does affect development, but to what extent? What I'm saying here is that you're talking about new PDP, you're talking about APC, the division in APC. I really don't see how that is compared, and devoting much time anyway, because what we're talking about now is
drives development.
The political class, you'll say, yes.
So if the driver is having any problem or seem to be ill or having some issues, don't you discuss the well-being of the driver?
Yes, if I will answer that question, yes, you discuss the well-being of the driver.
So I thought if we decide to talk about the well-being of the driver, is part and parcel of development.
Suleiman, the point I'm making is that what attention are you paying to the driver comparing to what the driver, the owner of the car, the state of the car that the driver has to drive? If you keep talking about getting another driver.
I mean, look at it from this perspective.
Yes.
I mean, we're focusing on it. The media is focusing on this much.
Yes.
And it's still this bad. So what happens then if you turn the other way?
I've given you an example. Are you telling me that the issue of ASU, for instance, that I said?
No, that's not my point.
Yes.
What I'm saying is this. If the media is focusing on this,
yes,
in the full glow of Nigerians,
yes,
who could shout and say, no, for doing this, we will not let you come back again. And yet it's going on this way. So what then happens if Nigerians, nobody can do what you have to do, and they know you're not watching? What do you think they'll do?
Well, Timberlane, you see, we are talking about relativity here. Well,
what do you think will happen if that were to be the case?
It depends on the information that they have.
Who has?
The people.
Isn't this information going to come about by focusing on some of these things? Because it's a watchdog. So if you see one thing going on right, they just focus on what's going on with the view to correcting it and letting the people know, listen, you can't sit back and watch this happen this way. You have a role to play.
What we're talking about now is statements being made by the political class. Am I right? That's what we're talking about here. And if people are making statements that will jeopardize the well-being of the people, why do you give such statement prominence?
In other words, I think I'm getting your point now. Your point is, for instance, ASU strike, which is very, very important to us as a people and as a nation, should now be the talking point of politicians.
From several angles, absolutely. From several angles. In fact, the ASU strike should, if we were to discuss it, I think every media should be talking about every nitty-gritty as it affects the ASU strike, as it affects the university. I'll give you an example. The university generates internal revenue. Nobody has talked about that. A quarter of many of our universities, I went to a school, I'm not a lecturer. I'm a farmer and